I married Frank 6 months ago and became stepmother to his 15-year-old son, Ansel. The boy was polite but distant, and lately he'd been sneaking out every afternoon, returning hours later. My husband thought it was normal teenage stuff, but I worried he was in trouble. So I followed him. Before we dive in, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories about stepfamilies and learning to honor the past while building the future, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now let me take you back to the day I discovered my stepson's secret. I knew I was making a mistake even as I did it. Following your teenage stepson when he sneaks out of the house, that's a violation of trust, a breach of privacy, the kind of thing that could permanently damage an already fragile relationship. I knew all of this, and I did it anyway. Because Ansel Bennett had been disappearing every afternoon after school for the past 3 weeks, and I was terrified he was in trouble. I'd been married to Frank for 6 months, which made me stepmother to his son Ansel, who just turned 15. It wasn't an easy role. Ansel had lost his mother 3 years ago, Monica Bennett, who died suddenly from a brain aneurysm at just 38 years old. Frank had been a widower for 2 years when we met at an art exhibition. He was there supporting a colleague whose daughter was displaying work. I was there because I'd always loved art, even though I had no talent for it myself. I was an accountant, good with numbers and spreadsheets, terrible with anything creative. We'd started talking about one of the paintings, and the conversation had flowed so naturally that we'd ended up getting coffee afterward. Then dinner the following week, then regular dates that turned into a relationship that turned into love. Frank had been honest from the beginning. He's struggling, Frank had told me early on. His mother was his best friend, and losing her destroyed him. He's in therapy, he's doing okay, but he's fragile. If this gets serious between us, you need to know that he might never fully accept you, and I'll always choose my son first. I appreciated the honesty and told him I understood, and I did understand, intellectually. A 15-year-old who'd lost his mother wouldn't welcome a replacement. I'd never expected Ansel to call me mom or treat me like family. I'd hoped we could eventually be friends, or at least friendly. But 6 months into the marriage, we weren't even that. Ansel was unfailingly polite. He said please and thank you, helped with dishes when asked, participated in family dinners with brief, cordial responses to questions. But there was a wall between us, invisible but impenetrable. He never initiated conversations with me. He never shared anything about his day, his friends, his feelings. He existed in our house like a courteous guest, present but not really there. Frank said it was normal, that it would take time, that I shouldn't push. His therapist agreed, so I'd tried to be patient, to give Ansel space, while making it clear I was available if he ever wanted to talk. But lately, something had changed. 3 weeks ago, Ansel had started disappearing every afternoon. He'd come home from school around 3:30, grab a backpack from his room, and leave again within 15 minutes. He'd return around 6 or 7 p.m., just in time for dinner, with vague explanations about studying at the library or hanging out with friends. At first, Frank and I hadn't worried. Teenagers needed independence. But then I'd noticed details that concerned me. Ansel would come home with paint under his fingernails, acrylic from the looks of it, in various colors. His clothes sometimes had small paint splatters, and when he returned, he had a distant, almost haunted expression. Maybe he's taking an art class, Frank had suggested when I mentioned it. Monica was an artist. Maybe he's exploring that connection to her. Did you ask him? He said he's just hanging out with friends. I don't want to interrogate him, Lorelai. He's 15. He deserves privacy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. What if Ansel wasn't with friends? What if he was involved in something dangerous, Drugs, graffiti, some group that was leading him down a bad path. What if the paint wasn't from an art class, but from something illegal? So, on a Thursday afternoon in late April, I did something I'm still not proud of. I left work early, parked down the street from our house, and waited. Ansel came home from school at 3:35 p.m. 15 minutes later, he emerged with his backpack and started walking. I followed in my car, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice, feeling like a spy in a bad movie. He walked for about 20 minutes, heading toward the old warehouse district on the east side of town, an area that had once been industrial but was now mostly abandoned buildings waiting for redevelopment. My concern intensified. What was Ansel doing in this neighborhood? He turned into a 3-story brick building that looked like it had once been some kind of factory or workshop. The windows were dusty, and a faded sign near the door read, "Harbor Art Collective, Studios Available." An art studio. Frank had been right. But why was Ansel being so secretive about it? And why here, in this run-down building? I parked and sat in my car for almost an hour, debating. I could leave, go home, pretend I'd never followed him, or I could go inside and finally understand what my stepson was doing every afternoon. The need to know won out. I entered the building quietly. The ground floor was a large, open space, mostly empty, except for some old equipment covered in tarps. A staircase led to the upper floors. I climbed carefully, my footsteps echoing in the silent building. The second floor had a long hallway with doors on either side, individual studios, most of them clearly abandoned, doors hanging open to reveal empty rooms thick with dust. But at the end of the hall, one door was closed. Light showed underneath it. I approached quietly and heard something that made my heart clench. The sound of someone crying. Soft, trying to be silent, but unmistakable. Ansel. I should have knocked. I should have announced myself. Instead, driven by concern, I slowly pushed open the door. The studio was larger than I had expected, with high ceilings and large windows that let in the late afternoon sun. The space was frozen in time. Art supplies organized on shelves, canvases stacked against walls, a work table covered in brushes and palettes, photos pinned on a bulletin board. And in the center of the room, standing in front of a large easel, was Ansel. He had his back to me, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, staring at the canvas in front of him. In his hand was a paintbrush, and on the palette beside him were fresh paints, greens and blues and golds. The canvas showed a landscape, a forest clearing with sunlight breaking through the trees in shafts of gold. The style was beautiful, impressionistic but detailed, filled with movement and life, and in the center of the clearing, barely more than sketched outlines, were 2 figures, a woman and a teenage boy, standing together. I must have made a sound, a gasp or a step that creaked, because Ansel spun around. When he saw me, his face went from grief to shock to fury in the span of a second. "What are you doing here?" His voice was raw from crying. "How did you followed me?" "Ansel, get out." He stepped between me and the canvas, as if protecting it from me. "You have no right to be here. This is private. This has nothing to do with you." "I was worried about you. You've been disappearing every day, and I thought..." "You thought what? That I was doing drugs? Joining a gang? So you followed me like some kind of stalker?" Tears were streaming down his face, but his voice was pure anger. "This is my mom's studio. This is her place, the only place I can still feel close to her. And now you've ruined it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Monica's studio. Of course. Ansel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You're not my mother, he shouted, his voice breaking. You'll never be my mother, and you have no right to be in her space, touching her things, seeing. He gestured at the painting, unable to finish. I wasn't trying to replace her. I was just worried. I don't care what you were trying to do. Just leave. Leave me alone. He turned back to the canvas, his whole body shaking, making it clear he was done talking to me. I stood there for a moment, paralyzed by guilt and uncertainty. Then I heard myself say, Ansel, it's getting dark. Please let me drive you home. We don't have to talk. I need to know you get home safely. I can walk. Please, I'm not trying to control you or invade your privacy more than I already have. I just want to make sure you're safe. There was a long silence. Then, without looking at me, Ansel began cleaning his brushes with mechanical precision, putting away paints, covering the canvas with a cloth. His movements were careful, reverent, like he was performing a ritual. When he was done, he walked past me without a word and headed down the stairs. I followed, maintaining distance, giving him space. The car ride home was silent. Ansel stared out the window, his jaw tight, his hands clenched in his lap. I wanted to apologize again, to explain, to say something that would make this better, but I could feel the wall between us now, thicker and higher than ever. When we pulled into the driveway, Frank's car was already there. Ansel got out immediately and went straight to his room, closing the door firmly behind him. Frank looked up from his laptop when I came in, took one look at my face, and said, "What happened?" I told him everything, following Ansel, the warehouse building, the art studio that had belonged to Monica, the painting Ansel was working on, his anger and hurt at being discovered. Frank's face went through several emotions: surprise, sadness, guilt, and something that looked like pain. I didn't know he'd found the studio. After Monica died, I couldn't handle going there. All her work, her supplies, everything exactly as she'd left it that last morning. I kept paying the rent on the space, thinking I'd deal with it eventually, but I couldn't. I should have told you about it. I should have talked to Ansel about it. He's finishing one of her paintings, a landscape with 2 figures. Was that something she was working on before she died? Frank's eyes filled with tears. The clearing painting. She started it a few weeks before the aneurysm. It's based on a place we used to hike. There's a state park about an hour from here with a trail that leads to this perfect clearing where the sun comes through the trees. Ansel loved going there when he was younger. Monica was painting it as a gift for him for his birthday. She never got to finish it. And now he's finishing it for her. And now he's finishing it for her, Frank repeated, wiping his eyes. God, Lorelai, he must feel so violated. That studio was his private space with his mother, and we invaded it. I invaded it, I corrected. You didn't know. But I should have. I should have noticed what he was doing, should have had conversations with him about Monica's things, about what he needed. I've been so focused on moving forward, on building our new family, that I haven't made enough space for him to grieve. We sat in heavy silence for a while. Then Frank said, I need to talk to him. Try to do some damage control. Let me try first. Frank looked surprised. Lorelai, he's furious with you. I know, but I'm the one who violated his trust. I need to be the one to apologize and try to make this right. If I don't, that wall between us will become permanent. Frank hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but if he doesn't want to talk, then I'll back off, I promise. I went upstairs and knocked softly on Ansel's door. No response. Ansel, it's Lorelai. I'd like to talk to you for just a minute. If you want me to go away after that, I will. More silence. Then, doors unlocked. I entered to find Ansel sitting on his bed, still in his paint-stained clothes, staring at his hands. He didn't look up when I came in. I sat in the desk chair across from him, giving him space. I'm sorry. What I did today was wrong. Following you, going into your mom's studio without permission, that was a violation of your privacy and your grief. I was worried about you, but that doesn't justify what I did. Ansel still didn't look up, but I saw his jaw tighten. Your dad told me about the clearing, about the hikes you used to take. That painting your mom was making for you, I can understand why finishing it would be important. You don't understand anything, Ansel said quietly. You didn't know her. You don't know what it's like to lose someone like that. One day she was here, and the next day she was just gone. No warning, no goodbye, just gone forever. You're right. I don't understand that specific pain, but I understand that you're hurting and that you miss her desperately. And I understand that I'm not her, and I'm never going to be her. Ansel finally looked up at me, his eyes red from crying. Then what are you trying to be? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? You married my dad. You moved into our house. You cook dinner and do laundry and try to make conversation at meals. What are you trying to be to me? Because if you're trying to be my new mom, it's never going to happen. I took a breath, trying to find the right words. I'm not trying to be your mom, Ansel. Your mom was Monica. She'll always be your mom. I'm someone who loves your dad and wants to build a life with him, and that life includes you. I'm not trying to replace your relationship with your mom or make you forget her. I'm just trying to be someone who cares about you and wants good things for you. But you don't know me. You don't know anything about me except that I'm Frank's kid. You're nice to me because you have to be, not because you actually care. That's not true, isn't it? Name one thing about me. One real thing. Not something obvious like that I'm 15 or that my mom died. I started to speak, then stopped, realizing he was right. I didn't know him. Not really. I knew surface facts, that he was in 10th grade, that he was quiet, that he did well in school, that he liked cereal in the morning and didn't care for meat. I'd been so focused on being a good stepmother in the abstract that I'd never really tried to know Ansel as a person. You're right, I admitted. I don't know you, and I'm sorry for that too. I've been so worried about not pushing too hard, about giving you space, that I haven't actually tried to build a real relationship with you. Ansel looked surprised, as if he'd expected me to argue or make excuses. The painting you're working on, I said carefully, the one your mom started, can I ask why you're finishing it? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because she didn't get to. She had so many plans, so many things she wanted to do and create, and she didn't get to finish any of them. This painting, she was so excited about it. She showed me the sketches, told me it was going to be a surprise for my 12th birthday, and then she died, and it just sat there, unfinished, like everything else. His voice was thick with emotion. I found the studio key in Dad's desk about a year ago. I went there once, just to see. Everything was exactly how she'd left it. Half-finished paintings, sketches on the walls, her coffee mug still on the table. It was like walking into a time capsule. And I saw the clearing painting on the easel, just the background and rough outlines of the figures. And I thought if I could finish it, it would be like giving her one last thing, like she'd left it for me to complete. But I'd have to learn how to paint before. That's beautiful, I said softly. Really beautiful. I've been teaching myself from her old books, from YouTube videos, trying to match her style. It's been 3 weeks, and I still don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm not as good as she was. I'm sure she'd be proud of what you're creating. Ansel's expression hardened slightly. You didn't know her. You can't know what she'd think. You're right.
But I know that a mother who created a painting as a gift for her son would be proud to see that son honoring her memory and her work. That seems like a universal truth. Ansel looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you marry my dad? He told you I might never accept you. He told you this would be hard. Why did you still want to be part of this family? I thought about the question, about the easy answers I could give, that I loved Frank, that I wanted to build a future together, that family was important. All of those things were true. But Ansel deserved more than platitudes. I saw how much your dad loved you. From our very first conversation about you, it was clear that you were the most important person in his life. And I thought that a man who loved his son that much, who was that devoted to being a good father, was someone worth building a life with. I knew it would be complicated. I knew you might never accept me. But I also knew that being part of a family that had that much love in it was worth the difficulty. Even if I never like you? Even if you never like me. Though I hope eventually we can at least be friendly, maybe even friends. Ansel is quiet again. Then, I don't want you coming to the studio. That's my space with my mom. I need it to be private. I understand. I won't go back. But, he hesitated. If you wanted to know about the painting, about how it's going, I could tell you. Sometimes. If you asked. It was the smallest of offerings, barely an olive branch. But it was something. I'd like that. I'd really like that. Ansel nodded, then looked down at his hands again, the paint still under his nails, the evidence of his secret work. Can I ask you something else? I said. I guess. How much longer do you think it'll take to finish?
He thought about it. Maybe another month? There's a lot of detail work left on the trees, and the figures need to be fully realized. Plus, I want to add some elements she had sketched in the margins, wildflowers in the clearing, birds in the trees. She had this whole vision for it. Will you tell me when it's done? I'd love to see it finished, if you're willing to show me. Ansel looked surprised again. You'd want to see it? Of course. It's important to you, which makes it important. And honestly, I love art, even though I have no talent for it myself. I'd love to see what you're creating. Okay, he said slowly. When it's done, I'll show you. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. The wall between us was still there, still thick and high, but there was a small crack in it now, a tiny opening that might eventually grow into a door. Over the following weeks, Ansel and I began a new ritual. A few times a week, usually at dinner or in the evening, I'd ask him about the painting. How was the work going? What had he accomplished that day? What was challenging him? At first, his answers were brief and guarded. But gradually, he began opening up. He'd tell me about color mixing techniques he was trying, about YouTube tutorials he'd found helpful, about moments when he felt like he'd captured something Monica would have done, and moments when he felt lost. I learned that Monica had painted in an impressionist style, all movement and light and emotional resonance rather than precise realism. I learned that Ansel had inherited some of her talent, but felt pressure to make his additions to the painting worthy of her vision. I learned that the clearing in the painting wasn't just any place. It was where Frank had proposed to Monica, where they'd taken Ansel as a baby, where the family had celebrated milestones. And through these conversations about the painting, I learned about Ansel himself, that he was thoughtful and careful and harder on himself than he needed to be, that he had his mother's eye for beauty and his father's determination, that he was carrying grief that was too heavy for a 15-year-old, but managing it with remarkable strength. Frank watched these exchanges with careful optimism, not pushing, not interfering, just being present and supportive. 6 weeks after I'd followed Ansel to the studio, he came home on a Friday afternoon with a different expression than usual. Not the distant, haunted look, but something lighter. Nervous, but hopeful. It's done, he said at dinner. The painting. I finished it today.
Frank and I both looked up, surprised. Already? I thought you said another few weeks. I've been going every day after school and most of the weekend. I needed to finish it. And today, everything came together. How do you feel? I asked. Ansel thought about it. Relieved, sad, proud, maybe? I don't know. It's complicated. Would you like to show us? Frank asked gently, or would you prefer to keep it private? Ansel looked at me, something unreadable in his expression. Lorelai asked to see it when it was done. I said I'd show her. So, yeah, if you both want to come tomorrow, I could show you. We'd love that, Frank said, his voice thick with emotion. The next morning, the three of us drove to the warehouse building together. It was the first time Frank had been back to Monica's studio since her death, and I could see the emotional weight of it in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Ansel led us up the stairs and down the long hallway. He unlocked the studio door and stepped aside, letting Frank enter first.
Frank stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the space he hadn't seen in 3 years. His eyes moved over the photos on the walls. Monica smiling, Monica with baby Ansel, Monica covered in paint and laughing. The art supplies organized exactly how she'd left them, the other canvases stacked against the walls. "It's exactly the same," he whispered. "I didn't want to change anything," Ansel said. "It felt wrong to move her things." Frank nodded, unable to speak. Then Ansel led us to the easel in the center of the room. The large canvas was fully visible with the afternoon light streaming through the windows. The painting was breathtaking. The forest clearing was alive with light and movement. Sunlight broke through the trees in shafts of gold that seemed to actually glow. The trees themselves were impressionistic but detailed, each leaf suggested rather than painted, creating a sense of depth and atmosphere. Wild flowers dotted the clearing, purples and yellows and whites. Birds were frozen mid-flight in the branches. A stream ran along one edge, catching the light. And in the center of the clearing stood 2 figures, now fully realized. A woman, Monica, clearly recognizable from the photos on the walls, stood with one hand reaching toward the light, her dress catching the breeze, her expression peaceful and joyful. Beside her was a teenage boy, Ansel, painted at his current age rather than as the child he'd been when Monica was alive. He stood looking at his mother, and the love and grief in that painted expression was almost too much to bear. But there was something else in the painting, something I hadn't expected. In the far edge of the clearing, barely visible in the shadows of the trees, was a third figure, a woman with dark hair partially obscured, watching from a distance, not intruding into the central scene, but present, witnessing. "Ansel," Frank breathed. I don't have words. This is extraordinary." Ansel shifted nervously. "I tried to finish it the way Mom would have. I studied her other work, tried to match her brushstrokes, her use of light. I don't know if I got it right." "You got it right," Frank said firmly. "This is exactly how she would have painted it. You have her gift, son. You really do." I was still staring at the third figure in the shadows. Ansel noticed. "That's you," he said quietly. "I added you at the end. I know Mom painted this as something between just her and me, but you're part of my life now. Not the same as her, not trying to replace her, but there. So I thought you should be in the painting too, in the background, but present." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Ansel, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that I see you, that I know you're trying, that maybe eventually we can figure out how to be a family that includes both my mom's memory and you being here now." Frank wrapped his arm around Ansel, and they stood together looking at the painting Monica had started and Ansel had finished.
a bridge between past and present, between grief and healing. "What are you going to do with it?" I asked. "Hang it at home," Ansel said immediately. "In the living room, where everyone can see it. Mom made it for me, and I finished it for her. It belongs with our family." "Our family," Frank repeated softly, looking at me. "All of us." We stood in that studio for a long time, the three of us, surrounded by Monica's art and memory, looking at the painting that represented both what had been lost and what might still be built. Later that afternoon, Frank and I helped Ansel carefully wrap the canvas and transport it home. We hung it in the living room, above the fireplace, where it caught the evening light.
That night, the three of us sat on the couch together, not quite comfortable yet, still figuring out how to exist as this new configuration of family, but trying. Ansel sat between Frank and me, looking at his completed painting. "Thank you for finishing it," Frank said to him, "for giving your mom that gift, and for including Lorelai. That was generous." Ansel shrugged. "Lorelai said she wanted to see it when it was done. I keep my promises." It was a small thing, that phrase, but it felt significant. An acknowledgement that we had a relationship now. Tentative and new, but real. That promises made between us mattered. "The studio," I said carefully. "Are you going to keep going there?" "Yeah, if that's okay with Dad." Ansel glanced at Frank. That nodded affirmatively. "There are other paintings Mom started, and I want to do my own work too. She always said the best way to honor an artist is to create art yourself." He paused. "Maybe someday, if you want, you could come see some of my own stuff. Not Mom's work. That'll always be private. But things I'm creating, if you're interested." "I'd love that," I said honestly. Bamadi's squad-a-line, while Shivadanaf and I. How we're just our own person, what we do with Unsaredalai, where Ruchi and I glance at the Dakame. "The studio," I said carefully. "Are you going to keep going there?" "Yeah, if that's okay with Dad." Ansel glanced at Frank, that nodded affirmatively. "There are other paintings Mom started, and I want to do my own work too. She always said the best way to honor an artist is to create art yourself." He paused. "Maybe someday, if you want, you could come see some of my own stuff. Not Mom's work. That'll always be private. But things I'm creating, if you're interested." "I'd love that," I said honestly. Months passed. The painting became a fixture in our home, a reminder of Monica's presence and Ansel's talent and the complicated reality of blended families. Ansel continued going to the studio several afternoons a week, now working on his own pieces. He started showing me photos of his work on his phone, landscapes mostly, following his mother's style but developing his own voice. Our relationship remained complicated. There were still walls, still moments of distance, still days when I could feel Ansel pulling away. But there were also moments of connection, conversations about art, about school, about small things that mattered. He started joining Frank and me for weekend activities occasionally. He stopped being quite so careful around me, occasionally forgetting to maintain the polite distance and just existing naturally. One evening, about 4 months after the painting was finished, Ansel came into the kitchen where I was making dinner. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "There's an art show at school next month. Students can submit work, and I was thinking about entering one of my paintings. The thing is, parents are invited to the opening night. Dad's planning to come, but would you want to come too?" My heart swelled. Of course, I'd be honored. "It's not a big deal," Ansel said quickly. "It's just a school thing. But I worked really hard on the piece I'm submitting, and I thought you might want to see it." "I absolutely want to see it." "Thank you for inviting me."
Ansel nodded, then hesitated. Lorelai, I know I've been kind of difficult, with you being here and everything. I just wanted to say, I'm trying to figure out how to let you in without feeling like I'm betraying Mom. It's complicated. I know it is, and I appreciate that you're trying. That means everything. You're not so bad for a stepmom. It wasn't, I love you. It wasn't, you're like a mother to me. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was enough. The art show was everything I'd hoped for. Ansel's painting, a landscape of the clearing where Monica's painting was set, but in autumn instead of summer, with falling leaves and different light, was beautiful. More than that, it was confident. His own voice, influenced by his mother, but distinctly his own. Frank and I stood in front of it with pride, and when a teacher came over to compliment Ansel's work, she introduced us as Ansel's parents. Ansel didn't correct her. He just glanced at me with a small, almost shy smile that said, "This is okay. You being here is okay."
After the show, the three of us went out for ice cream, something Monica had apparently done with Ansel whenever he accomplished something worth celebrating. "Mom would have loved your painting," Frank told Ansel. "The way you captured the light through the autumn leaves, that was pure Monica technique." "Thanks, Dad." "She'd be proud of you," I added. "Not just for the art, but for everything. For how you've handled losing her, for how you've navigated us becoming a family, for the person you're becoming." Ansel looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that nearly broke my heart. "I think she'd be okay with you. I think she'd want Dad to be happy, and she'd want me to have people who care about me. So I think she'd be okay with you being here." "That means more than you know," I said, my voice thick. "But you're still not my mom. You know that, right?" "I know, and I don't want to be. Monica is your mom. She'll always be your mom. I'm Lorelai, someone who cares about you and wants good things for you. Is that okay?" Ansel thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah, that's okay." It wasn't a perfect resolution. Blended families don't get those. There would be more difficult moments, more grief, more times when Ansel would need space to remember his mother without me present. Our relationship would always be complicated by the fact that I came into his life after profound loss, and that loss would always be part of our story. But we had something now, a foundation, tentative but real, built not on me trying to replace what he'd lost, but on honoring what he'd lost while creating something new alongside it. The painting of the clearing hung in our living room, Monica and Ansel in the center, me in the shadows, a perfect representation of our family, the past and present coexisting, the memory and the reality both honored. And sometimes when Ansel was at the studio working on his art, he'd text me photos of his progress, small gestures that said, "You're part of this now. Not the same as Mom, but present, witnessing, caring." And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. What did you think of Ansel's journey to accept Lorelai while still honoring his mother's memory? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about grief, blended families, and learning to make space for both the past and the present touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more meaningful stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next heartfelt tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.